Hello everybody, and welcome to the end of the year Town Hall Safety Moment. This moment is going to be focused on being outside. This time of year in New England, we start to see a lot of that weather come back. We see the pollen, we see the mosquitoes, and we see the ticks coming back. So, this is a great moment to think about if you're just recreationally outside, or if you work through National Grid and you're naturally out in the field every day. Let's take a look at some tips when you're outside. When discussing ticks and poison ivy at best as well, you're going to notice there's certain areas that you might get into where it's much more common. Being in your grass isn't quite the same as you're being in a tree line area or a wooded area. So if you're more central Massachusetts or western, you're going to see it's much more common to have those tree lines that hit the property level. So if we take a look here, notice we have our grass line and our tree line. If you were to go ahead and start to adventure over into your tree line, this is where you'd want to be much more careful. These wooded areas where trails for biking or walking paths are going to have a lot of setup where you can get ticks on you. It's really important to keep that in mind when you're outside. Don't forget, you could be in a grassy area and still be susceptible to ticks, especially, as you see here, if we're dealing with tall grass. Ticks can easily climb up to those tall grass places and leap onto your pants. Always be careful. While we're outside talking about ticks, we might as well tie in my favorite story, poison ivy, and how dangerous it absolutely can be because most of us are allergic. So, let's take a look at what happens in the springtime when the leaves start coming back. This, you've always heard it before, leaves of 3, let them be. What's hard to notice is the difference between poison ivy and all of these other different types of plants. You're going to notice that poison ivy has notches on the leaves and it doesn't create a symmetrical leaf. One side has that notch over here, but the other side doesn't, right over here. And that is how I most quickly identify and look at poison ivy leaves and look for those notches and the lack of symmetry when I'm near them. What's tough about poison ivy is once you get it on you, you don't really know. It doesn't really have a filament to it, and it doesn't really feel different. The problem is, it soaks into your skin, and what happens is from there, 1 to 2 days later, you start to break out. Once you start to break out, it might be a little too late at that point to sort of solve the problem and what's going on. A handful of years ago, when I had first moved into the house I'm living now, what happened was I went and I started pulling down vines from trees that looked like this. Now, those vines itself are fine, but poison ivy can also grow in vines. 2 to 3 days later was covered in poison ivy. Here's a lovely picture of that. Yes, that was unsettling time. I had to definitely seek medical attention. When you get poison ivy on you, the whole focus of why it starts to spread or it starts to react with your skin is because you don't create a certain enzyme that washes the oils from the poison ivy plant away. So, unfortunately, I learned the hard way. And if you ever get poison ivy near your eyes, it's really important to seek medical attention as quickly as possible. Usually at that point, they put you on steroids to make sure it can be controlled so you don't have any elongated problems. So, absolutely be careful around poison ivy. Well, there you have it, everybody. A couple little things to watch out whether you're outside recreationally and you're biking around or walking on paths and trails, or whether you're actually out in the field. Upstate New York, Western Massachusetts, all of these locations can have those two things, ticks and poison ivy. Check for ticks, make sure you're wearing long pants if you're in wooded areas or high grass areas. And for poison ivy, be able to identify the 3 leaves and let them be. Watch for those notched and the non-symmetry, and you'll be okay. Have a great day, and enjoy the weather out there.